something 60 miles per hour just sliced through the dark. 3,000 feet below you, no light, no warning, just a bill the length of your arm moving faster than a speedboat. The swordfish is one of the most dangerous hunters in the ocean, and the giant squid, as long as a school bus runs from it. We're going inside that darkness, the heated eyes, the bone weapon, the ambush, the battle science only just filmed. If you enjoy it, like and subscribe, it really helps. Brace yourself, we begin. A swordfish is born without a sword. For the first few weeks of its life, it looks like any other tiny ocean fish. Stubby nose, round head, nothing special. Then something starts to grow. The upper jaw begins pushing forward, slowly at first, then faster. By the time the fish reaches a few months old, that jaw has stretched into a flat, smooth, pointed blade. Scientists call it a rostrum. Everyone else calls it a bill. And it keeps growing for the rest of the fish's life, eventually reaching 1/3 of the animal's total body length. On a full-grown swordfish, that bill can be 5 feet long. Hold that picture. 5 feet of bone extending from the face of a fish the size of a small car. The bill alone is longer than most people are tall, but length is only part of the story. What makes this weapon extraordinary is its structure. Under a microscope, the bill looks like a bundle of tiny tubes packed tightly together, the same way a handful of drinking straws looks solid when you squeeze them. That design gives the bill two abilities at once. It can absorb massive impact without cracking, and it can flex slightly during a strike, which means when a swordfish slashes sideways through a school of fish, the bill bends just enough to avoid snapping, then springs back into shape. Engineers who study materials for cars and aircraft have actually examined swordfish bills. They found that the bone inside is unlike almost anything else in nature. It handles compression and bending forces the way the crumple zone of a car handles a crash. It deforms just enough to protect the rest of the structure. For a living weapon travelling at speed, that combination of toughness and flexibility is almost impossible to beat. Now here is where it gets stranger. The bill does not stab prey the way most people think. A swordfish does not spear a fish and carry it around like a fork. The bill is a slashing weapon. The swordfish swims into a school of fish, whips its head from side to side at full speed, and the bill tears through everything in its path. Stunned, injured fish scatter in every direction. The swordfish then circles back and swallows them whole. The whole sequence happens in seconds. Scientists who attach cameras to swordfish and track their hunting confirm this. The slash and return method is efficient and brutally fast. One sweep through a dense school can disable a dozen fish at once. The swordfish does not need to catch anything. It creates the damage first, then collects. The bill also grows back. If a swordfish damages its rostrum during a hunt or a collision, the tissue around it regenerates faster than almost any other bone in ocean life. Scientists are still working out exactly how this happens, but the regrowth rate is well above what standard bone repair looks like in other animals. A weapon that fixes itself. That detail alone has caught the attention of medical researchers studying bone healing in humans. For a predator that hunts alone, in complete darkness, at high speed, the bill is a perfect tool. Silent, fast, lethal without needing to be precise. Just swing it through a crowd and win. And the swordfish is about to swing it somewhere very dark, very deep, and very far from the surface. Picture a speedboat at full throttle on open water. That kind of speed leaves a white trail of foam. You can hear the engine screaming. It takes technology, fuel, and a hull designed around going fast. A swordfish does it with muscle and a tail. 60 miles per hour. That is the top speed measured in swordfish, making them one of the fastest fish ever recorded in the ocean. For comparison, an Olympic swimmer moves at about 5 miles per hour. A bottlenose dolphin, known for its explosive bursts, tops out around 25 miles per hour. A swordfish at full sprint nearly doubles that. To understand how a fish reaches that kind of speed, start with the tail. The swordfish's tail is shaped like a crescent moon, stiff and narrow, designed for power with every single stroke. Engineers call this shape a high aspect ratio fin. It works the same way a long, narrow airplane wing works, converting force into forward motion with almost no wasted energy. Each stroke of that crescent tail drives the fish forward like a hammer blow. Then there is the body itself. The swordfish has no scales. Run your hand along a swordfish and it feels smooth, almost slippery. That smooth skin creates almost no drag as the fish accelerates through water. Water resistance is what slows everything down in the ocean, the same way wind resistance limits how fast a car can go. The swordfish eliminates as much of that resistance as physics allows. The bill helps here too. As the fish accelerates, the bill cuts through the water ahead of the body, parting it like a wedge, reducing the pressure the fish has to push through. The streamlined head then slips into the gap the bill already opened. The whole body is designed around one idea: go faster with less effort than anything else nearby. But here is the part that surprises most people. Swordfish do not spend much time at top speed. 60 miles per hour is a sprint, used for hunting bursts and escape situations. Their daily movement through the ocean is slower, steadier, and calculated. They cruise, conserve energy, then accelerate at the exact moment it counts. Scientists who tagged swordfish with tracking devices watched this rhythm play out. Long, calm periods of movement at depth, followed by sudden vertical surges, fast horizontal dashes, then stillness again. The speed is a tool the fish pulls out on purpose, for a specific moment. That moment usually involves prey, and the prey rarely sees it coming because the swordfish's approach is nearly silent. Water is dense, and a fish moving through it at low speed creates almost no detectable pressure wave. By the time the swordfish shifts into a sprint, the gap between hunter and hunted has already closed to nothing. The question that nobody fully answered until recently is what happens during those vertical surges. Why does a fish that fast dive downward into colder and darker water when its prey exists in all directions? The answer has to do with something inside the swordfish's skull, something scientists spent years trying to explain. A structure that keeps parts of its body warm even when the surrounding water is cold enough to slow most animals to a crawl. That structure changes everything about how this fish hunts. Most fish are cold-blooded. That means their body temperature matches the water around them. Swim into cold water, your muscles slow down, your reactions slow down, your eyes process visual information more slowly. For most ocean animals, cold water is a disadvantage they cannot escape. The swordfish solved this problem in a way that sounds like something from a science fiction story. Behind each eye, the swordfish has a modified muscle that generates heat. Scientists who examined this tissue found that it stopped working as a regular muscle long ago. Over millions of years of evolution, it transformed into something closer to a biological furnace. The tissue is packed with mitochondria, the tiny structures inside cells that produce energy. So many mitochondria that the organ generates a steady output of heat directly next to the eye and into the brain tissue connected to it. The result is that a swordfish can keep its eyes and brain up to 15 degrees warmer than the water it swims through. At the surface in tropical water, that is not dramatic. But when the swordfish dives to depths where the water is near freezing, that 15-degree advantage becomes enormous. Cold water slows the chemistry of vision. The proteins inside the eye that process light work faster when they are warm. A swordfish with a heated eye in frigid deep water sees the world more clearly, processes what it sees faster, and reacts quicker than any cold-eyed creature at the same depth. It is the difference between watching a video in regular speed versus watching it in slow motion. The swordfish sees fast. Everything else at that depth sees slow. Now add the size of those eyes. A fully grown swordfish has eyes roughly the diameter of a softball, among the largest eyes relative to body size of any open ocean fish. Large eyes gather more light. In the deep ocean, where sunlight never reaches and the only illumination comes from bioluminescent organisms, gathering every available photon of light matters enormously. Scientists who measured swordfish eye sensitivity found that their visual system is tuned specifically for detecting the faint blue-green glow produced by deep-sea creatures. That is the exact colour of light that bioluminescent squid, fish, and jellyfish produce in the dark. The swordfish's eye is essentially calibrated to spot glowing prey against absolute blackness. Put those two things together, eyes that stay warm in freezing water and eyes built to detect the exact light frequency that deep-sea prey emits. The swordfish enters total darkness and still sees everything that glows. Its prey, operating with cold eyes and no such advantage, struggles to process the threat until the bill is already moving. Researchers who first described the heating organ in detail said it was unlike anything they had encountered in other bony fish. The nearest comparison was certain sharks, which use a different system to warm their muscles, and some tuna, which keep their core body temperature elevated. The swordfish took a different route, focused the heat, aimed it directly at the organs that matter most for hunting, and achieved something precise and targeted. The eye heater works harder as the swordfish dives deeper and the water gets colder. The colder the environment, the bigger the advantage, and the swordfish dives very deep. For a long time, the giant squid was considered the most terrifying predator in the deep ocean. The stories were everywhere: ancient sailors drawing sea monsters, sperm whales hauled onto ships with circular scars across their skin, the diameter of dinner plates from where something enormous had gripped them, scientists measuring squid beaks found in whale stomachs and calculating the size of the animal that beak must have come from. The numbers were staggering. A giant squid can reach 45 feet from the tip of its longest tentacles to the end of its body. That is longer than a full school bus. It has 10 limbs, 2 of them longer than the rest, lined with hundreds of suckers. Each sucker on the 2 long tentacles is rimmed with sharp, curved teeth, made of a material similar to a human fingernail but far harder. The squid uses those toothed suckers to grip prey and pull it toward a beak that can bite through bone. It has 3 hearts, blue blood, eyes the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes of any animal alive today on Earth. It can change the pressure inside its body to move up or down in the water column without using much energy. And it can shoot a cloud of dark ink to blind or confuse a threat. On paper, a giant squid sounds untouchable. When a swordfish enters the same depth, the squid moves away. Scientists studying giant squid behavior through deep-sea cameras and acoustic tracking began noticing this pattern across multiple ocean regions. Giant squid, animals that actively hunt large fish and avoid almost nothing at their depth, show strong avoidance behavior when swordfish signatures appear in the water column. The squid change direction. They descend deeper. They go quiet. The evidence is indirect because filming both animals in the same frame at 3,000 feet in open ocean is extremely difficult, but the movement patterns are consistent enough that marine biologists who study squid behavior consider swordfish a primary reason giant squid stay in certain zones and avoid others. The ink cloud, the squid's main defense, fails here completely. Ink works by creating a dark cloud in the water that confuses a predator relying on vision or smell to track prey. The ink also contains chemicals that irritate sensitive tissues. Against most ocean hunters, that buys the squid enough time to escape. A swordfish using heated eyes calibrated for darkness, moving at a speed the squid cannot match, is not slowed down by an ink cloud. The swordfish does not need to follow the squid by scent the way a shark might. It is already moving faster than the squid can flee. The ink cloud appears behind the squid, and the swordfish is already ahead of where it was released. The size of the squid works against it in another way. A 45-foot animal is a large, slow-moving target compared to a swordfish at sprint speed. The squid's acceleration, while impressive for a soft-bodied animal, cannot compete with a streamlined, scale-free, crescent-tailed fish that evolves specifically around one trait: closing distance fast. What the squid has in size, the swordfish defeats with speed and precision. And the swordfish goes somewhere the squid would rather avoid. The surface of the ocean is full of life and light. Go down 200 feet and you enter the twilight zone. Sunlight fades to a dim blue haze. Temperature drops sharply. Pressure starts to build. Keep going. At 1,000 feet, you are in what scientists call the midnight zone. No sunlight reaches here. The pressure at this depth equals the weight of roughly 300 fully grown adults stacked on top of a single square inch of your body. The temperature hovers near freezing. The only light in every direction comes from the bodies of creatures that produce their own glow. Swordfish dive through all of this on a daily basis. Tracking data from tags placed on swordfish across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans shows a clear pattern. During the day, swordfish descend to depths between 1,500 and 3,000 feet to hunt. At night, they rise toward the surface, following the daily migration of smaller fish and squid that themselves travel up and down the water column on a daily cycle. The swordfish synchronize their entire hunting schedule around this movement. 3,000 feet is not a casual trip. At that depth, the pressure pressing in from every direction equals more than 90 times the air pressure you feel standing at sea level. For a human body, exposure to that pressure without protection would be instantly and completely catastrophic. The lungs would collapse, the air spaces in the body would compress, the result would happen in milliseconds. The swordfish body handles this without any visible stress. The key is that the swordfish has no air-filled swim bladder, the organ most fish use to control their buoyancy. A swim bladder fills with gas, and gas compresses dangerously under extreme pressure. The swordfish abandon that system. Instead, it relies on the oil stored in its liver and flesh to maintain neutral buoyancy. Oil does not compress the way gas does. The fish can descend to crushing depth and ascend back to the surface without needing to adjust any internal pressure system along the way. Scientists who first began tracking swordfish vertical movement were surprised by how fast these dives happened. A swordfish can complete the round trip from surface to 3,000 feet and back in a single night. That means ascending and descending through a range of pressure that would require a human diver to spend hours decompressing. The swordfish does it in one continuous movement. Now picture what the swordfish encounters at the bottom of that dive. Complete darkness, water close to freezing, pressure that would crush most structures, and in that environment, the swordfish is the fastest, sharpest-eyed, highest body temperature predator present. Everything else at that depth evolved to survive the cold, the dark, and the pressure. The swordfish evolved to hunt there. Scientists noticed something else in the tracking data that raised new questions. During some dives, the swordfish would pause at a specific depth for several minutes before ascending quickly, hovering, waiting, then moving with sudden speed. Whatever the swordfish was waiting for down there, it had a reason. You might picture a swordfish stabbing its prey like a javelin. That image is wrong, and the truth is far more violent. A swordfish hunting in open water does not aim its bill at a single target. It does not slow down, line up a shot, and thrust the bill into one fish. That method would be too slow and too unreliable. Instead, the swordfish uses its bill the way a baseball player uses a bat. It swings. Scientists studying swordfish stomach contents found something strange for years. The fish inside were not punctured. They were cut. Clean lacerations across the bodies of prey fish, the kind of wound produced by a blade moving sideways at speed, not a spike moving forward. That pattern was the first clue that the bill operated as a slashing weapon, not a stabbing one. Later, underwater camera footage confirmed the technique. A swordfish approaching a school of fish does not slow to engage. It accelerates. At the moment it enters the school, it swings its head from side to side in rapid sweeping motions, the bill cutting horizontal arcs through the water. Each arc passes through the densest part of the school. Fish that are struck are not killed immediately. They are stunned, spinning, disoriented, trailing blood. The school scatters in every direction. Then the swordfish circles back. With its heated eyes still processing the movement of every injured fish, the swordfish picks off the stunned ones individually, each one swallowed whole, head first. The bill was never meant to be the killing tool. It is the chaos tool. It creates a situation where prey cannot coordinate an escape response. The actual eating happens after. The force generated by a swordfish bill swing has been estimated by scientists studying the rostrum's material properties and muscle geometry. The force involved is comparable to the impact generated by a large wrench swung by a professional baseball player. Applied to the body of a fish the size of a football, that force is catastrophic. The bill does not need to be sharp to be deadly. It just needs to be fast and hard. But the bill does have edges. The cross-section of a swordfish rostrum is roughly oval, flattened on the top and bottom and slightly pointed along the sides. Those side edges are hard enough to slice soft tissue at the speeds the swordfish generates. A direct lateral strike from a swordfish bill does not feel like being hit with a baseball bat. It feels like being hit with the edge of a paddle moving at 60 miles per hour. Fish experience the full effect in a fraction of a second. Giant squid, which are much larger, require more force to disable. The swordfish bill at full lateral velocity can strike a tentacle with enough force to tear it partially or completely away from the squid's body. Scientists who examined squid remains at depth, using remotely operated vehicles on the ocean floor, found fresh tentacle sections that showed cuts consistent with a bill strike. The squid does not need to be killed outright. It needs to be slow enough to catch, and one hit from a swordfish bill can do exactly that. Something else happens when a swordfish hunts in a group. Or rather, something strange happens because swordfish almost never hunt in groups. The giant squid has survived hundreds of millions of years. In that time, it developed one of the ocean's most reliable escape systems. When threatened, the squid contracts powerful muscles and blasts a cloud of dark ink into the water around it. The ink is thick, opaque, and disperses quickly into a wide black plume. Most predators relying on vision to track prey lose the target completely. The squid jets away in the opposite direction while the predator stalls, confused by a cloud of blackness where its meal just was. Against sharks, large fish, and most ocean hunters, this works. The ink cloud has saved countless squid lives across millions of years of evolution. Against a swordfish, the system collapses. The first problem is reaction time. A giant squid detecting a nearby threat needs a fraction of a second to recognize the signal, send the command to its ink sac, and release the cloud. That might sound fast. The swordfish at sprint speed covers the gap between recognition and arrival faster than the squid's nervous system can complete the sequence. By the time the ink starts to release, the swordfish is already inside the effective range of its bill. The second problem is direction. The squid releases ink behind it as it jets forward. The ink cloud forms where the squid was, not where it is going. The swordfish, tracking the squid's movement with heated eyes, built for detecting bioluminescent movement in total darkness, adjusts its trajectory immediately. The cloud marks the squid's starting position. The swordfish follows the movement, not the position. The third problem is light. Deep-sea ink clouds work partly because they blend into the dark water around them. Near the surface, in any ambient light, the cloud creates contrast rather than concealment. But even in the deeper zones where giant squid prefer to stay, the swordfish is operating with eyes tuned for detecting the faint glow of bioluminescent organisms. The squid's body, even through an ink cloud, still emits bioluminescent signals. The heated eye picks those signals up through the dark water. A marine biologist studying deep-sea squid defense behaviors described the ink response as designed for biological hunters using olfaction and standard vision at moderate speeds. The swordfish operates outside those parameters entirely. The defense evolved for a different threat model. There is one scenario where the ink cloud creates a partial advantage for the squid. If the squid releases the ink directly between itself and the swordfish during a head-on approach, the sudden darkness ahead of the swordfish forces a brief adjustment. The swordfish, moving at speed, cannot reverse course instantly. It must arc around the cloud. That arc costs fractions of a second, and the squid uses those fractions to accelerate in a new direction. Scientists who studied swordfish attack footage saw this play out in a small number of encounters. The squid survived those specific moments. The swordfish did not abandon the hunt. In every recorded observation, the pursuit continued, and what the swordfish found waiting below the ink cloud was something with weapons of its own. Materials engineers spend careers trying to solve one problem. A structure needs to be rigid enough to deliver force, but flexible enough not to shatter under impact. Steel is rigid but can crack. Rubber is flexible but cannot deliver force. Carbon fibre is light and strong but can snap suddenly without warning under the wrong kind of stress. Nature solved this problem in the swordfish bill before humans ever started thinking about it. The rostrum of a swordfish is built from a type of bone that scientists classify as acellular, meaning the bone matrix itself contains very few living cells. Most bone in animals, including human bone, is filled with living cells that constantly repair and reshape the tissue. The swordfish bill cuts down on that biological maintenance overhead and instead builds a matrix that is almost purely structural. The result is bone that is harder and stiffer than most tissue in the body, arranged in a pattern that handles force differently depending on which direction it arrives from. Look at the bill in cross-section and you see why it works. The outer layer is dense and hard, like the shell of a helmet. The interior is filled with a foam-like structure of tiny connected chambers. That interior design is almost identical to the inside of a bicycle helmet, and it serves the same purpose. Hard outer layer absorbs and distributes impact across a large area. Porous inner structure compresses slightly to absorb the remaining energy, rather than transmitting it all the way to the base of the bill where it attaches to the skull. When a swordfish swings its bill through water at 60 miles per hour and connects with a large fish, or the body of a squid, the forces involved are enormous. Without this design, the bill would snap at the connection point, leaving the swordfish permanently disabled. Instead, the bill flexes a few degrees, absorbs the shock through the interior structure, and rebounds to its original shape. Scientists who worked with swordfish bill samples in mechanical testing applied loads equivalent to what would occur during a high-speed lateral strike. The bill deflected and returned without structural failure at force levels that would have cracked standard bone completely. The research team described the material properties as genuinely surprising for a biological structure. The bill is also tapered along its length. At the base where it connects to the skull, it is wide and reinforced. Toward the tip, it narrows. This gradient means the heaviest forces from the swing are handled at the widest, strongest part, while the tip, which actually makes first contact with prey, can flex slightly on impact before the full force arrives. The design prevents the tip from shattering on contact the way a blunt spike might. Medical researchers studying bone fracture repair have looked at the swordfish bill specifically because of this combination of toughness and flexibility. Human bones are rigid and fracture under lateral loading. The swordfish bill handles lateral loading as its primary function. Understanding how that structure achieves what it does has potential applications for designing better bone implants. The weapon heals, the weapon flexes, the weapon delivers force that nothing in its path can withstand. And now the swordfish is pointing it somewhere deeper. For a long time, scientists assumed swordfish hunted the way most fast fish hunt. Chase from behind, match speed, accelerate past the prey, strike. It made sense given how fast swordfish can move. The cameras proved that assumption wrong. When researchers from multiple ocean institutes managed to attach small camera tags to swordfish in the Atlantic Ocean, they captured footage that changed how scientists understood swordfish hunting strategy entirely. The fish were ascending from depth at high speed, angling upward at steep trajectories, aiming for the underside of schools of fish positioned above them in the water column. The attack came from below, every time. The reason becomes clear when you understand vision in the ocean. A fish swimming horizontally has decent forward and lateral vision. Its blind spot is directly below. Looking down into darker water, with light coming from above, anything approaching from beneath is nearly invisible until it is almost at striking range. The fish above has no warning. The swordfish descends to a depth below its target school, then angles upward and accelerates. As it rises, the bill is already pointing toward the densest part of the school. The fish above look down and see nothing because the swordfish is coming from darkness into relative brightness. By the time the school registers the pressure wave from the approaching fish, the bill is already inside the group. The strike happens in the upward arc, the moment when the swordfish is moving fastest because its tail thrust is combining with its ascending momentum. At the peak of that combined force, the head swings laterally. The bill sweeps through the school from underneath, where the fish are most densely packed and least able to scatter quickly. Scientists studying the footage notice something specific about the approach angle. The swordfish consistently came in at angles between 30 and 50 degrees from vertical, not straight up. This angle matters because a completely vertical approach would let the school detect the pressure wave sooner as it compresses the water directly below them. An angled approach from below compresses the water at a shallower angle, creating less detectable signal until the fish is too close for the school to react in time. The school's escape response is to scatter radially outward from the centre of the attack. The swordfish accounts for this. The lateral bill sweep at the moment of impact hits the fish that are still in their original positions before the scatter response is fully executed. By the time the school's nervous system processes the threat and sends the signal to flee, several fish are already stunned. Marine biologists who reviewed this footage described the technique as more sophisticated than typical ambush predation. The swordfish was factoring in the geometry of its prey's escape response before the attack even began. The attack from below works even better in complete darkness, and in darkness, with heated eyes, the swordfish has an advantage that compounds everything else it is already doing. The giant squid, which spends much of its time hovering at mid-depth in the dark, faces this exact scenario more often than scientists initially thought. The giant squid is armed in ways that seem almost unfair. Each of its two long tentacles, the ones it shoots outward to snatch prey from a distance, is covered in suckers. On those long tentacles, the suckers are large, the size of a coin, and ringed on their inner edge with a circle of hard, curved teeth. These teeth are made of chitin, a material similar to the stuff in insect shells, and they can grip and tear simultaneously. When the squid wraps those tentacles around a target, the sucker teeth sink in and hold. The grip is nearly impossible to break by pulling alone. The 8 shorter arms add to this. They also carry suckers, smaller but numerous and equally capable of gripping and puncturing. The squid's combined arm force can restrain animals much heavier than itself, and at the centre of all those arms sits the beak, hard, curved, powerful enough to bite through bone and cartilage. An encounter between a giant squid and almost any other ocean animal ends with the squid feeding. A swordfish changes that calculus in 2 ways. First, the swordfish never allows the squid to get its arms around it. The entire swordfish hunting strategy depends on speed and distance. The bill strike is designed to disable at range, before physical contact occurs. The swordfish does not grapple, it does not wrestle. It moves through the squid strike zone faster than the tentacles can deploy and extend, lands a bill impact, and then moves away. The squid needs to close that gap to use its weapons. The swordfish is already gone. Second, and more important, the swordfish strikes the tentacles themselves. Marine biologists examining footage of swordfish and squid interactions, along with physical evidence collected from deep-sea observations, found that swordfish bill strikes frequently connect with the squid's outstretched tentacles. A swordfish bill travelling at high speed through water, swung laterally, delivers enough force to a tentacle to partially or fully sever it. Once a tentacle is damaged, the squid loses its primary capturing weapon on that side. It can still move, it can still ink, it can still bite. But it has lost reach, and reach is the squid's main advantage over smaller, faster predators. Scientists found tentacle sections on the ocean floor near areas of known swordfish activity. The cuts were clean at one end and ragged at the other, consistent with a sharp object severing tissue at high velocity followed by tearing. That pattern matches a swordfish bill strike almost exactly. The squid does fight back when it can, in encounters where the swordfish comes too close, Squid have been observed trying to wrap arms around the swordfish's body. In those rare instances, the sucker teeth do make contact, and swordfish recovered by commercial fishermen sometimes show circular scar patterns on their flanks consistent with squid sucker injuries. But the squid wins those contact moments only when the swordfish makes a mistake. When the swordfish controls the distance and pace, the squid never gets close enough, and the swordfish is getting ready to go somewhere that should make both of them uncomfortable. Stand at sea level, and the weight of the atmosphere above you presses down on every square inch of your skin. You never feel it because you grew up in it and your body is built around it. The pressure inside your body matches the pressure outside, and everything is balanced. Now go down 100 feet underwater. The pressure roughly doubles. Divers feel this in their ears, their sinuses and their air spaces. It is manageable with training and equipment, but your body is already working against something. Go to 300 feet and professional divers need specialized gas mixtures just to breathe without losing consciousness. Swordfish go 10 times deeper than that. At 3,000 feet, the pressure pressing in from every direction is roughly 90 times the atmospheric pressure you feel at sea level. For a human body, that pressure would collapse the lungs in an instant, compress the sinuses, force nitrogen into the blood in quantities that would cause fatal damage to the brain and joints. There is no recovery from that kind of exposure without the right equipment. The swordfish swims there and hunts. The key difference is the swordfish's internal structure. Animals that survive extreme pressure fall into two categories: those that use rigid air chambers to maintain form, and those that fill their bodies with liquid or solid tissue that matches the surrounding pressure naturally. A swordfish falls into the second category. Most fish use a swim bladder, a gas-filled sac to maintain neutral buoyancy without constant swimming effort. At depth, that gas compresses, the swim bladder shrinks, and the fish sinks. To maintain depth, the fish must either constantly swim upward or secrete more gas into the bladder, a slow process. Going deep and coming back up requires careful management to avoid fatal damage to the gas sac. The swordfish abandon the gas bladder entirely. Its buoyancy comes from the high oil content in its liver and throughout its body tissue. Oil is nearly incompressible. At 3,000 feet, the oil in a swordfish body behaves essentially the same as it does at the surface. The fish does not need to manage gas pressure. It simply descends and rises, following prey wherever the pressure takes it. The muscles, organs, and tissues in a swordfish body are adapted to function at extreme pressure because the cells themselves are built around dense fatty compounds that resist compression. The protein structures inside those cells are also pressure tolerant in ways that warm water, shallow water fish would not be. Scientists who studied swordfish tissue under simulated depth pressure found that muscle function remained near normal across the full range of depths the fish actually uses. That is unusual. Most fish tissue degrades in efficiency at pressure far below what the swordfish routinely handles. The fish that reaches 60 miles per hour at the surface can still hit maximum sprint speed at 3,000 feet. Pressure does not slow it down. Cold does not slow it down. Darkness does not slow it down. What else shares that 3,000-foot world with it? At 3,000 feet, the water temperature sits just above freezing. In that environment, cold-blooded creatures operate on reduced power. Their chemical reactions slow down. Muscle fibers contract less forcefully. Vision processes signals more slowly. A predator operating in cold water at depth is running at maybe half the speed and sharpness it could achieve in warm water near the surface. The swordfish heats itself, not its whole body. Something more precise than that. Inside the skull, just behind each eye, sits a mass of modified tissue that functions as a biological heater. This structure, which scientists call a thermogenic organ, evolved from eye muscle tissue over millions of years. The cells in this organ are packed with far more mitochondria than any other tissue in the fish's body. Mitochondria produce energy, and energy production generates heat as a side effect. Pack enough mitochondria into a small space, and the heat they produce accumulates rather than dispersing. The result is a localized heat source positioned directly against the swordfish's eye and the adjacent brain tissue. Blood vessels running through the organ carry that heat outward and keep the eye warm even as the surrounding ocean water chills everything else. Measurements taken from swordfish caught at depth confirm the temperature difference. The brain tissue and eyes run roughly 15 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the water surrounding the fish. In near-freezing deep water, that 15-degree gap translates directly into a biological performance advantage with no equivalent among the prey the swordfish hunts. Visual processing depends on chemistry. Light hits a photoreceptor cell and triggers a cascade of chemical reactions that eventually produces a nerve signal. Warm chemistry moves faster. At 15 degrees above the surrounding water temperature, the photoreceptor cascade in the swordfish eye runs significantly faster than the same cascade in any cold-eyed animal at the same depth. The swordfish sees movement sooner, it responds faster, it commits to an attack trajectory before its prey has finished processing the threat. The brain tissue staying warm matters for the same reason. Decision-making, motor coordination, and attack timing all depend on fast neural signals. Cold neural tissue carries signals more slowly. The swordfish brain at depth still processes information at near-surface speed. Its prey's brains process information at cold depth speed. The gap between those two rates is the window the swordfish hunts inside. Scientists who study this organ in detail consider it one of the most elegant examples of targeted biological engineering in the ocean. Most warm-blooded animals maintain whole-body warmth, which requires enormous caloric investment. The swordfish invests heat only where it counts for hunting, the eyes and the brain. The rest of the body, the muscles, the organs, the tail, all run at ambient temperature. The fish gets the hunting advantage of the warm-blooded vision without the full energy cost of full body temperature regulation. One researcher who spent years studying swordfish thermoregulation described the eye heater as the single most important factor in explaining why swordfish dominate their hunting depth. Every other fish there is operating in the cold. The swordfish is operating with a heated targeting system, and that targeting system is about to track something across an entire ocean. Swordfish do not travel in groups. They do not form schools, pods, or hunting packs. They do not mate for life. They do not raise young together. A swordfish moves through the ocean as a solitary animal, crossing distances that challenge the imagination, guided by systems scientists are still working to fully understand. Tracking tags attached to swordfish in the Atlantic Ocean recorded migrations spanning thousands of miles. A single fish tagged off the coast of Florida turned up in waters near the Azores Islands, halfway across the Atlantic in a matter of months. Another tagged fish made a similar journey in reverse. These migrations happen seasonally and appear to follow water temperature gradients, the invisible boundaries between warm and cold water masses that shift with ocean currents throughout the year. The swordfish follows these gradients the way a traveller follows roads. Where the water temperature shifts along the surface, prey concentrations change. Schools of smaller fish and squid cluster at specific temperature boundaries, because those boundaries also mark the edges of nutrient upwelling, where deep, cold, nutrient-rich water rises toward the surface. The swordfish tracks the prey, and the prey tracks the nutrient boundary. At the scale of an ocean basin, this migration covers roughly 3,000 miles one way. A swordfish makes this journey alone, navigating in open ocean with no landmarks and no social group to follow. Scientists believe the fish uses a combination of cues including water temperature detected through sensory organs in the skin, Earth's magnetic field detected through structures in the inner ear, and possibly the chemical signatures of specific water masses that have distinct dissolved mineral compositions. None of these navigation mechanisms has been fully proven in swordfish specifically. The magnetic field hypothesis comes from work done on other highly migratory fish, like bluefin tuna and some shark species, which show sensitivity to magnetic gradients. Scientists applied those findings to swordfish behaviour because the migration patterns share structural similarities. What is well established is the endpoint accuracy. Tagged swordfish return to specific regions year after year, suggesting they are not wandering randomly but navigating to remembered or instinctively targeted locations. Some areas where swordfish aggregate seasonally, specific canyon systems along the continental shelf edges, have hosted swordfish populations for as long as commercial fishermen have recorded catch data, spanning generations of both fish and fishermen. A 3,000-mile solo crossing through open ocean takes weeks. During that crossing, the fish is hunting daily, diving to depth at night, and ascending toward the surface during daylight hours. It is managing its own energy budget, caloric intake, and navigation simultaneously, with no external reference points beyond what its body senses. For a fish that evolved as a solitary ambush predator, the migration makes sense. Two swordfish in the same patch of water compete for the same prey. Spreading out maximizes each individual's access to resources. The ocean is large enough that each swordfish essentially claims its own section of the sea during transit. When they do converge, at the feeding grounds at the end of the migration, the interaction between multiple swordfish in the same area reveals a behavior scientists found difficult to categorize. Something happens at those convergence points that looks deliberate. Most predators in the ocean select prey smaller than themselves. That is the safe strategy. A fish that is smaller than you cannot fight back effectively. It cannot injure you. The risk-reward balance tips in your favor. Go after something bigger and you risk injury, expended energy with no meal, or outright death. The swordfish ignores this rule. Documented encounters in scientific literature and from commercial fishermen who have spent careers at sea include swordfish attacking dolphins, large sharks, sea turtles, and even juvenile whales. These are animals that outweigh the swordfish by a significant margin. A large dolphin weighs close to 400 pounds. A bull shark can reach 300 pounds and is itself one of the most aggressive predators in the ocean. A swordfish, by comparison, typically weighs between 150 and 200 pounds. The swordfish attacks anyway. Scientists who reviewed the evidence across multiple documented encounters identified a pattern. The swordfish attacks large animals most often when they approach an area where the swordfish is feeding or resting, and when the large animal moves into a trajectory that a swordfish might interpret as a direct approach. The response is immediate and aggressive. The swordfish turns toward the approaching animal and accelerates into a bill-first strike. A swordfish bill travelling at speed and striking a dolphin's flank or a shark's body causes serious damage. Scientists examining dead dolphins and sharks in areas with known swordfish populations occasionally found injuries consistent with bill punctures or lacerations. The wounds can penetrate several inches into muscle tissue. A strike to a vital area can be fatal even in an animal much larger than the swordfish itself. There are documented cases where swordfish bills broke off inside the bodies of large marine animals. The swordfish's bill, despite its toughness and flexibility, can snap under extreme lateral load if the strike angle is wrong or the target is rigid in a specific way. A broken bill is a permanent injury since the regeneration happens only at the outer tissue, and a complete loss of the bill leaves the fish disabled as a hunter, yet the fish still attacked. One explanation researchers offer is that swordfish evolved in ocean environments where aggression toward large, potentially threatening animals provided survival advantages over millions of years. An animal that retreats from anything bigger gets pushed away from feeding grounds by larger animals. An animal that attacks, even from a disadvantaged size position, keeps the territory. The aggression also extends to objects. Swordfish have attacked fishing vessels, the hulls of research submarines, oil pipeline infrastructure, and underwater buoys. Recovered materials showed bill fragments embedded in wood and even in the early steel alloy hulls of smaller ships. In several cases, the bill punctured the hull material entirely. Scientists studying this behavior note that inanimate objects do not trigger normal prey detection responses. The attacks on objects likely represent territorial or defensive reactions to large, unfamiliar shapes moving through the swordfish's space. An animal that attacks submarines and sharks with the same bill it uses to hunt squid is not making careful risk calculations. and it is about to meet something that tests even that aggression. Sound travels through water about 4 times faster than it travels through air. Every fish that moves, every current that shifts, every pressure wave from a tailstroke sends ripples spreading through the water in all directions. Most ocean animals generate these pressure waves without knowing it. They cannot turn them off because movement through water always produces them. The swordfish detects them all. Along both sides of a swordfish's body runs a line of tiny sensory organs called hair cells, embedded in fluid-filled canals just beneath the skin. Scientists call this system the lateral line, and it exists in some form in almost all fish. But the swordfish lateral line is more sensitive than in most species, tuned to detect the very small pressure changes produced by other animals moving in the water column nearby. Each hair cell works like a tiny microphone suspended in fluid. When a pressure wave reaches the canal, the fluid moves, and the hair cell bends slightly in response to that movement. The bending triggers an electrical signal that travels to the brain. The brain receives simultaneous signals from hundreds of these cells along the entire length of the fish's body, and uses the pattern of signals to calculate the direction, distance, and movement speed of whatever generated the pressure wave. In practice, this means the swordfish can detect prey that it cannot yet see. In complete darkness at 3,000 feet, where there is no light for even heated eyes to use, the lateral line provides a secondary sensory layer that maps the water column around the fish in real time. A school of fish moving 200 feet away generates enough pressure disturbance for the lateral line to pick up their direction and rough position. This ability becomes significant during the approach phase of an ambush hunt. The swordfish, ascending from below, is orienting its body based on 2 information streams simultaneously. The heated eyes track bioluminescent glow. The lateral line tracks pressure waves from the movement of the school. Both systems update in real time as the fish closes the distance. If the school moves suddenly, both systems register the change together. The swordfish adjusts trajectory faster than a predator relying on vision alone would. Scientists studying the lateral line in swordfish specifically found that the density of hair cells is higher in swordfish than in most comparable fish species of similar size. More cells means higher resolution. The picture the swordfish brain assembles from lateral line data is detailed enough to distinguish between the pressure signature of a single large fish and the overlapping signatures of a school. For hunting giant squid in total darkness, the lateral line may be the more important sense. Giant squid move by jet propulsion, contracting their mantle and expelling water in powerful bursts. Each jet creates a substantial pressure wave. In still, deep water, those pressure waves travel a long distance without dispersing. A swordfish with a sensitive lateral line can detect a jetting squid from a significant distance, even in complete darkness and zero bioluminescence. The squid cannot turn off its jet propulsion without stopping entirely. Moving away from danger creates the very signal that gives its position away. The more the squid tries to escape, the more clearly the swordfish tracks it, and the squid has something even its 3 hearts cannot compensate for. The giant squid runs on a remarkable biological system. 3 hearts pump blood through its body simultaneously. One main heart handles the bulk of circulation. 2 smaller hearts, called branchial hearts, sit at the base of the gills and pump blood specifically through the gill tissue to pick up oxygen. This triple heart system allows the squid to maintain circulation even under high physical exertion, pushing oxygenated blood to muscles that need it during a fast jet propulsion escape. The blood itself is blue. Squid and octopus blood uses hemocyanin to carry oxygen instead of the hemoglobin that makes human blood red. Hemocyanin is copper-based, which gives it a blue color when oxygenated. In cold water, hemocyanin is actually more efficient at binding and releasing oxygen than hemoglobin. The squid's blood chemistry is optimized for cold, deep water in a way that warm water animals cannot match. The mantle, the barrel-shaped body of the squid, houses powerful muscle arranged in circular and radial bands. When the circular muscles contract, the mantle squeezes inward, forcing water out through a narrow siphon. The squid uses this jet to accelerate rapidly in the opposite direction. At maximum exertion, a large squid can achieve bursts of speed up to about 25 miles per hour, enough to outpace most of its predators in the deep. At maximum exertion, the squid is moving at roughly 40% of the swordfish's top speed. That gap matters enormously. An escape strategy based on outrunning a predator only works when you are faster than that predator. The giant squid is not. Even in a straight sprint, the squid loses the distance race before it begins. And the squid's jet propulsion system has another weakness. It is directional. The squid jets backward relative to the direction its arms point. Changing direction requires either reversing the siphon orientation or rotating the entire body. Both take time. The swordfish turns by shifting its paired fins and bending the body in a single fluid motion. The radius of a swordfish turning arc is tight enough that it can pursue a jetting squid through direction changes without losing significant speed. The squid's advantage in maneuverability disappears against a predator with flexible fins and a muscular body built for lateral movement. 3 hearts cannot solve a speed deficit. Blue blood cannot compensate for directional limitations. The squid's biology is extraordinary in the environment it evolved for, but the environment it evolved for did not include the swordfish specifically targeting it. Scientists studying predator-prey dynamics in the deep ocean note that the giant squid occupies a position unusual for its size. An animal that large, with that level of biological armament, should face few threats in its depth range. The swordfish is one of the specific exceptions, and the squid's behavioral response documented across multiple ocean regions confirms this. When the chemical and acoustic signatures of a swordfish appear in the water column, giant squid alter their depth and direction. The response is fast, consistent, and appears across populations that could not have learned this behavior through any individual experience. It is written into the squid, generation after generation, as an instinct. Something shaped that instinct over a very long time, and that something is far older than either of them. A 15-degree temperature difference sounds small. Put your hand in water that is 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and then put it in water that is 75 degrees. The change is noticeable but not dramatic. You would call the first cool and the second warm. Nothing about that description suggests it could be the deciding factor in a hunt taking place 3,000 feet below the ocean surface. At the cellular level, 15 degrees changes everything. Chemical reactions follow a rule called the temperature coefficient. For every 10 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, most biological reactions roughly double in speed. This applies to everything happening inside a living cell: enzyme reactions, nerve signal transmission, muscle fiber activation, visual processing. Warm cells work faster than cold cells, and the difference scales up dramatically with each degree. At the depths where swordfish hunt giant squid, the water temperature is close to 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The heated brain and eyes of the swordfish run at around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Apply the temperature coefficient math across that 15-degree gap, and the swordfish's visual system and neural processing run at speed significantly higher than any cold-eyed animal at the same depth. In practical hunting terms, this translates directly into reaction time. A swordfish detecting a squid's movement can calculate a trajectory, commit to an acceleration, and begin the approach in less time than it takes the squid to register the threat and begin the jet propulsion sequence. The squid is processing its environment in slow motion relative to the swordfish. By the time the squid's cold neural system has assessed the situation and sent a motor command to the mantle muscles, the swordfish is already inside the kill zone. Scientists studying predator-prey reaction time in deep-sea animals estimated the total reaction time advantage the swordfish holds over cold-blooded prey at depth. The warm visual system alone cuts the swordfish's detection to response time by a factor that no behavioral adaptation in the prey can fully compensate for. The squid cannot learn to react faster. The cold of the deep ocean is a limit its biology cannot overcome. The heating organ also allows the swordfish to hunt effectively immediately after a deep dive. When a warm-blooded animal like a human goes into cold water, there is a period of adjustment where performance drops before the body compensates. The swordfish does not experience this. The eye heater runs continuously, so the transition from surface water to deep cold water does not require any warm-up period. The fish arrives at hunting depth already fully operational. This matters because swordfish make multiple dives per night in some seasons. Each dive is a fresh hunting attempt. A cold-down adjustment period between dives would reduce the number of effective hunts per night significantly. Without it, each descent is immediately productive. Researchers who modelled swordfish energy budgets found that the caloric cost of running the heating organ is surprisingly low relative to the hunting return it enables. The organ consumes energy, but the additional prey captured per night because of the advantage it provides exceeds the cost by a wide margin. The fish is getting a return on its biological investment every single night it hunts. Everything the swordfish is, the speed, the bill, the depth tolerance, the lateral line, the heated eyes, operates together as a single system. Each piece multiplies the effect of the others, and this system is about to enter a part of the ocean where the rules are different from anything above it. For most of human history, the ocean below 1,000 feet was completely invisible to us. We knew things lived there. Sperm whales surfaced with strange scars. Deep-sea trawling nets came up with creatures nobody had names for. Fishermen pulled lines from extreme depth and found animals attached that looked like they came from another planet. But seeing that world in real time, watching behaviour as it happened, required technology that did not exist until recently. When remotely operated vehicles finally reached operational depth with cameras capable of capturing usable footage in zero-light conditions, scientists began sending them down to areas where swordfish tracking data suggested regular activity. What the cameras recorded changed the understanding of deep-sea predation in ways that researchers are still analysing today. The first thing that surprised the teams was the density of life. The Midnight Zone, the region below 1,000 feet, had been described in older scientific literature as relatively sparse, a desert compared to the productive surface layers. The cameras showed something different. The water column at depth was filled with movement. Lanternfish in vast, loose aggregations drifting in slow currents. Deep-sea squid of multiple species hovering with tentacles extended, waiting. Jellyfish pulsing in clusters larger than a pickup truck, and moving through all of it, periodically visible as a fast, smooth shape crossing the camera frame, swordfish. The footage confirmed the ambush from below technique that tracking data had suggested. Multiple sequences showed swordfish approaching from below at steep angles, accelerating into schools of lanternfish, swinging the bill laterally, then circling back. The entire sequence from first contact to the fish, beginning to feed on stunned prey, lasted under 10 seconds in every recorded instance. Researchers also captured something unexpected. In several sequences, swordfish were observed pausing below specific depth layers and holding position for minutes at a time. The fish was orienting itself upward, motionless except for small fin adjustments to maintain depth, watching the water above. Scientists studying the footage concluded the fish was using its heated eyes to scan the layer above for bioluminescent signatures before committing to an ascent, patience before the sprint. One sequence captured a swordfish encounter with a large deep-sea squid, smaller than a giant squid but substantial, roughly 6 feet long. The swordfish approached from below and behind, angling its body in the ascending attack posture. The squid detected the approach, released ink and jetted upward. The swordfish adjusted trajectory in under 1 second and matched the squid's new direction. The squid released a second ink burst. The swordfish continued. The footage cuts before the conclusion, but showed the swordfish closing the remaining distance. The cameras also revealed the aftermath of swordfish feeding events. The ocean floor in areas below regular swordfish hunting zones showed accumulations of fish scales, squid tissue fragments, and partially consumed remains that had sunk from above. The volume of material suggested hunting activity at a scale significantly higher than scientists had estimated from surface-based observations alone. Scientists reviewing the complete camera dataset described the midnight zone, specifically in areas of known swordfish activity, as an active and violent place. The idea of the deep ocean as quiet and slow needed revising. Below 1,000 feet, the swordfish was making that world fast, precise, and lethal on a nightly basis, and it was doing it completely alone. Every major predator in the ocean that scientists study operates within a social structure of some kind. Dolphins hunt in coordinated groups, driving schools of fish into tight balls before taking turns feeding through the center. Orcas hunt in family pods, using learned strategies passed down through generations, some populations specializing in specific prey like great white sharks or grey whales. Even large sharks, often described as solitary, aggregate around productive feeding areas and implicitly coordinate by responding to the same cues. The swordfish does none of this. A swordfish hunts alone, travels alone, and succeeds alone. No communication with other swordfish during a hunt. No learned strategy passed from parent to offspring, because swordfish do not engage in parental care of any kind after spawning. Each fish develops its hunting capability entirely through individual experience within a genetic framework that has been refined over millions of years of evolution. Biologists who study animal hunting behavior classify predators by how much they depend on cooperation to succeed. At one end of the scale, social hunters like orcas and wolves fail significantly without group coordination. At the other end, animals that are fully solitary apex predators, capable of taking large prey without any assistance, are rare in nature and tend to share specific traits: exceptional speed, high intelligence or sensory capability, and physical weapons of unusual effectiveness. The swordfish qualifies on all three counts. Its speed places it among the top performers in the entire ocean. Its sensory system, combining heated eyes, a pressure-sensitive lateral line, and depth-tolerant physiology, gives it an information advantage over prey at every depth it hunts. Its bill is a biological weapon with no equivalent among bony fish. What makes the solo apex position significant beyond biology is the ecological role it creates. A solitary apex predator does not concentrate its hunting pressure in one location the way a pack does. It distributes that pressure across a wide area as it migrates and ranges. This means its impact on prey populations is spread across ocean basins rather than concentrated in one region. The swordfish is not just a predator. It is a population regulator operating at continental scale. Scientists studying fish population dynamics in the Atlantic found that swordfish removal from a region, through overfishing, correlated with population explosions in the prey species the swordfish had been controlling. Specific squid species and mid-water fish populations that swordfish regularly preyed upon grew to densities that then destabilized the organisms those prey species fed on. The swordfish was holding something in check that nothing else replaced: a single swordfish, hunting alone across thousands of miles of ocean, exerts more ecological influence than its individual size suggests, because it is the only thing doing what it does at the scale it does it. Remove the swordfish, and the ocean changes shape. And the swordfish's shape is about to reveal something scientists spent years trying to explain. Pick up a fish from almost any ocean species and run your finger along its body from tail to head. You will feel the scales catch against your skin, each one slightly raised at the trailing edge, overlapping like tiles on a roof. Scales protect the fish from injury and parasites. They are a fundamental feature of fish biology, present in species across hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary history. Run your hand along a swordfish and feel nothing but smooth muscle under thin skin. The swordfish has no scales as an adult. Juvenile swordfish are born with scales that cover the body in the normal way, but as the fish grows, those scales disappear. By the time a swordfish reaches full size, the body surface is completely smooth from the bill to the base of the tail fin, covered only by a thin layer of skin with a slightly oily texture. Scales create drag. Even small scales, each only a millimetre or two raised from the skin surface, disrupt the smooth flow of water along the body and create small zones of turbulence that add resistance. At low swimming speeds, this effect is minimal. At high speeds, it compounds into a significant energy cost. A fish sprinting at 60 miles per hour is generating enough water resistance that small drag increases matter enormously. The swordfish's smooth skin allows water to slip past the body with almost no turbulence along the majority of its length. The drag coefficient of a swordfish body, measured in fluid dynamic studies, is remarkably low for a biological structure of its size, comparable to engineered objects that humans specifically designed for minimal drag, like racing kayak hulls or torpedo bodies. Scientists studying the swordfish body surface under high magnification found something additional. The skin secretes a thin layer of oil that further reduces surface friction where the water contacts the fish. The oil comes from glands distributed across the skin and is continuously replenished. At speed, this oil layer creates a thin boundary between the skin and the water, reducing friction in the same way that lubricating a surface reduces the effort needed to slide something across it. The combination of smooth skin, continuous oil secretion, and the bill parting the water ahead of the body produces a fish shaped entirely around minimizing the energy cost of speed. Every feature that most fish have for protection or other purposes has been reduced or eliminated in the swordfish if it interfered with going fast. This specialization has a cost. Without scales, the swordfish has less physical protection against injury from contact. The skin can be damaged more easily than a scaled fish of similar size. This is one reason swordfish evolved the attack from distance strategy with the bill rather than engaging prey in close contact. Physical contact carries a higher risk for a scale-free animal. The skin also makes the swordfish more vulnerable to certain parasites that scales would physically block. Researchers examining swordfish tissue have found parasitic copepods, small crustaceans that attach to fish tissue, in higher numbers per body surface area than in comparable scaled species. Speed costs something. The swordfish pays that cost and hunts anyway. And the bill it hunts with is doing something remarkable between hunts. A swordfish bill takes punishment. Every hunt that involves a lateral strike through a dense school of fish, every attack on a large squid, every aggressive encounter with a shark or a boat hull puts mechanical stress on the rostrum. Over a lifespan that can reach 10 years or more, a swordfish makes thousands of hunting strikes. Some of those strikes connect with targets hard enough to cause surface damage to the bill. The bill repairs itself faster than almost any other bone structure studied in ocean animals. Scientists examining swordfish rostrums collected from commercial fishermen and research catches noticed something about the outer surface of the bill. In older, larger fish, the bill surface showed a texture of fine grooves, small pit marks, and surface irregularities that indicated past damage. But beneath those surface marks, the underlying structure was intact and fully solid. The surface had scarred, but the core structural integrity had been maintained. When researchers looked more closely at the tissue surrounding the bill, they found active bone-generating cells at levels much higher than in the adjacent skull bone. These cells, called osteoblasts, are the biological machinery that builds bone. In most fish, osteoblast activity is elevated only during growth phases when the animal is young, then drops to a maintenance level in adulthood. In the swordfish rostrum, osteoblast density remained elevated throughout the animal's adult life. The biological interpretation is that the bill is in a constant state of active repair. Surface damage triggers an accelerated healing response in the surrounding tissue, and new bone material is deposited to fill damaged areas. The process is slower than, for example, the healing of soft tissue injuries, but faster than bone repair in most other fish or in mammals of comparable size. For a structure that is the swordfish's primary weapon and tool for every hunt, this repair capacity is critical. A hunting weapon that degraded permanently with each use would eventually fail entirely, leaving the fish unable to hunt effectively. The continuous repair cycle keeps the weapon functional across thousands of uses over a decade or more. Medical researchers interested in bone fracture healing have studied the swordfish rostrum for exactly this reason. Human bones heal, but the process is slow, incomplete in some fracture types, and often requires external support like casts or rods to maintain alignment during healing. The swordfish rostrum heals under active mechanical stress, while the fish continues hunting without external support. The geometry of the repair keeps the bill straight and functional throughout. Scientists studying the growth pattern of the bill in juvenile swordfish found that the initial rapid growth phase, where the rostrum extends significantly during the first year of life, uses a different cellular mechanism than the repair and maintenance phase in adults. The growth phase cells are optimized for laying down large volumes of new bone quickly. The adult phase cells are optimized for targeted repair of specific damage sites. Two different biological systems working in sequence to build and then maintain a living weapon. And that weapon has been tested against something that has been evolving alongside it for much longer than either of them have existed in their current forms. Evolution does not move in straight lines. It responds. A prey species develops a defense and survives better. The predators that happen to counter that defense eat more and reproduce more. The next generation of predators carries that counter trait more widely. Then the prey that happens to counter the counter trait survives better, and the cycle continues, each side pushing the other forward through millions of years of biological pressure. Scientists call this cycle coevolution. When a predator and prey species share the same environment long enough, they leave marks on each other in their biology. The swordfish and deep-sea squid species show exactly this pattern. Swordfish fossil records extend back tens of millions of years. Ancient versions of the swordfish had bills, suggesting the rostrum evolved early in the lineage and has been a defining feature for a very long time. Giant squid and related large squid species have a fossil record that extends even further back. The two groups have shared the same ocean depths for long enough that evolutionary biologists consider them a classic predator-prey pair, each shaped by the other. The squid's large eyes are one example of this pressure. The giant squid has the largest eyes of any living animal on Earth today. Dinner plate sized, roughly 10 inches across, they are far larger than any squid would need for ordinary light-gathering purposes. Scientists who studied the optical geometry of those eyes concluded they are specifically optimized for detecting large, fast-moving objects at long range in dim conditions. In other words, giant squid eyes may be large specifically to detect approaching swordfish from further away. The extra distance gives the squid marginally more time to initiate an escape response. Against a swordfish with heated eyes and a high-speed approach, every fraction of a second of additional warning matters. The squid evolved eyes enormous enough to gain that fraction. The swordfish, in turn, evolved the ambush from below approach and the heated eye system that allows it to operate in darkness, where the squid's visual advantage diminishes. The squid cannot see the approach it never evolved to watch for because it evolved to watch for threats at the same depth, coming horizontally. The swordfish attacks from a direction. The squid's enormous eyes are least effective at monitoring. Squid ink composition also shows evidence of this pressure. Studies of giant squid ink found chemical irritants tuned specifically to affect the sensory systems of bony fish, the category the swordfish belongs to. The ink is not just an opaque cloud. It contains compounds that can disrupt the lateral line sensitivity of fish that contact it directly. Against a swordfish moving fast enough to avoid extended contact with the ink, this chemical component has reduced effectiveness. Against slower, bony fish predators, it may have been highly effective, and the swordfish's speed evolved partly as a response to that chemical defense. Each adaptation the squid developed pushed the swordfish to evolve further. Each adaptation the swordfish developed pushed the squid to evolve further. Neither animal today is what it was 50 million years ago. Both are better, faster, and more specialized than their ancestors, because the other animal would not stop improving. The arms race is still running. In the summer of 1967, a research submarine named Alvin was sitting on the ocean floor off the coast of Cape Cod when it was attacked. A swordfish, approaching from alongside, drove its bill into a gap between the hull plates of the submarine. The bill penetrated the outer hull material and became lodged. Scientists aboard heard the impact and felt the submarine shift. When they surfaced and examined the hull, the bill was still embedded in the material, broken off where it met the hull surface. The Swordfish was nowhere to be seen. Alvin is a tough research vessel built for deep-sea work. The hull is designed to withstand enormous pressure. A swordfish bill punched through it. This was not the only incident of this kind. Maritime records going back centuries include accounts of swordfish attacking wooden sailing vessels, with bills found embedded in hull, planking sometimes reaching depths of over a foot into the wood. Several historical accounts describe the bill penetrating the hull completely, causing leaks that required emergency repair at sea. One account from the 1800s described a swordfish attacking a whaling ship repeatedly after an initial strike. Scientists who study swordfish behaviour interpret these attacks as aggressive responses to unfamiliar large objects entering the swordfish's space. The fish does not distinguish between a rival, a predator, a whale, and a submarine. A large object moving through its environment triggers an aggressive assessment, and the swordfish response to a perceived threat is to accelerate toward it and strike. Oil pipelines along the sea floor in areas of swordfish activity have also been found with bill fragments embedded in the exterior coating. The bills penetrated the outer protective layer of the pipe, though not the metal beneath. Inspection crews working on pipeline systems in the Gulf of Mexico and the North Atlantic have encountered this damage more than once. Swordfish attacks on boats are well enough documented that some naval engineers working on submarine hull materials have specifically referenced the swordfish as a biological stress test. If a hull material can withstand a swordfish impact at the speeds the fish generates, it has passed a real-world performance test that lab equipment cannot easily replicate. The behaviour also reveals something about how the swordfish processes its environment. An animal that attacks oil pipelines and research submarines is operating with a threat response system that does not require the threatening object to be alive. Large, unfamiliar, solid objects in the swordfish's territory are treated as potential threats, and the swordfish's response to threats is always the same. Move toward them fast, hit them with the bill. This aggression is the same trait that makes the swordfish willing to attack dolphins, sharks, and giant squid much larger than itself. The risk calculation that holds most predators back from engaging threats above their weight class simply does not apply here the way it does to other animals, and the results of that aggression, expressed over many years of hunting, have shaped the ocean around it in ways that go far beyond individual encounters. Swordfish show one of the most dramatic size differences between males and females of any large fish in the ocean. Female swordfish grow significantly larger than males. A mature female swordfish can reach 14 feet in total length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. That is the length of a small car and heavier than most motorcycles. Male swordfish rarely exceed 7 feet and typically weigh under 200 pounds. At full size, a female swordfish is roughly 5 times heavier than a male of the same age. Scientists studying this pattern, called sexual dimorphism, propose several explanations for why females evolve so much larger than males. The most supported explanation connects directly to reproduction. A larger female body can produce significantly more eggs. A female swordfish at maximum size can release anywhere from several million to nearly 30 million eggs in a single spawning event. That number of eggs requires an enormous body to produce and store before release. In open ocean, eggs released into the water column face almost no parental protection. They drift with currents, subject to predation from filter feeders, temperature fluctuations, and displacement by storms. The survival rate from egg to juvenile swordfish is very low. Out of millions of eggs released, only a tiny fraction will survive to adulthood. The swordfish's reproductive strategy compensates for this by releasing so many eggs that even a fraction of a percent surviving produces enough offspring to sustain the population. Male swordfish contribute their portion and move on. Their evolutionary pressure was speed and range, reaching females during the spawning season rather than investing in body size. A faster, more mobile male can reach more females across a larger area during the spawning window, contributing genes more widely than a larger, slower male could. Spawning occurs in warm, shallow water, typically surface layers of tropical and subtropical regions during specific seasons. This means the same fish that dives 3,000 feet into freezing darkness to hunt giant squid also travels to the warm surface in tropical waters to reproduce. The swordfish bridges extreme environments in a single lifetime. After spawning, females return to their deep hunting ranges quickly. There is no nest, no guarding behaviour, no contact with the eggs again after release. The eggs hatch within 2 to 3 days in warm water, and the larvae, tiny and transparent, begin feeding immediately on microscopic plankton. They are entirely on their own from the first moment. The larvae grow fast. A young swordfish reaches a foot in length within its first year and begins developing the bill that will define its hunting strategy. By its third year, the fish is already an effective predator. The largest females in the ocean, the 1,000-pound individuals that biologists occasionally encounter through commercial fishing catches, can be over 15 years old. An animal of that age and size has made thousands of dives to the deep ocean, crossed Atlantic and Pacific basins multiple times, and released hundreds of millions of eggs into the world's oceans. And as the oceans change, that animal is being pushed somewhere it has never been before. The surface of the ocean is warming. Over the past century, average ocean surface temperatures have risen measurably across all major ocean basins. For most discussions of climate change, ocean warming appears in the context of coral reef bleaching, sea level rise from melting ice, and disruption of weather patterns. The effect on deep ocean predators like the swordfish is less discussed but equally significant. Swordfish track prey by following temperature gradients in the water column. The fish and the schools they hunt both orient to specific temperature boundaries. As surface temperatures rise, those boundaries shift. Warm water, which used to start at a certain depth, now extends deeper. The cool layer that swordfish historically used as their hunting corridor is being pushed downward. Scientists analysing swordfish catch data from commercial fishing operations over several decades found a consistent trend. Swordfish are being caught at greater average depths than they were 20 or 30 years ago. The gear that worked at certain depths in previous decades now needs to be set deeper to reach the fish. The swordfish have followed their prey boundary downward as warming pushed it. Deeper hunting means the swordfish now regularly operates in pressure zones it historically entered only during peak hunting dives. The daily routine is shifting toward extreme depth. The energy cost of reaching hunting depth increases when that depth is greater, because the fish must swim further on each dive and surface again further. The oil reserves needed to sustain neutral buoyancy at greater depth must be maintained at higher levels. The prey species the swordfish depends on are also shifting. Lanternfish and midwater squid that form the bulk of the swordfish's diet are themselves tracking temperature changes in the water column. Their daily vertical migration, the cycle of ascending toward the surface at night and descending during the day, is changing in timing and range as water temperatures shift. The swordfish must adapt its own daily rhythm to match a moving target. At the extreme deep end of the new hunting range, the swordfish is entering zones it did not previously frequent. Those zones contain creatures that science has only begun to catalogue. Strange predators adapted specifically to depths far below what swordfish historically occupied are now potential competitors or threats. Scientists are not yet sure which. The distribution of giant squid is also shifting. Giant squid populations in some ocean regions are growing as swordfish pressure changes and as temperature changes affect the prey that squid themselves depend on. In regions where swordfish are being pushed to new depths, giant squid populations in those same regions show changes in their own distribution patterns. Two animals already locked in a millions of years arms race are now both responding to a third pressure. A warming ocean reshaping the environment both of them evolved for. What happens when two co-evolved adversaries are pushed into new territory together, under new conditions, is something scientists are only beginning to observe, and in the places where they currently meet, Something else is present that neither of them can avoid. Sound travels everywhere in the ocean. Fish communicate with sound. Shrimp colonies produce a constant crackling. Whale songs travel thousands of miles. The ocean is acoustically busy, full of biological signals that animals use for navigation, communication, and threat detection. Many fish have evolved the ability to detect specific sound frequencies that warn them of approaching predators. A low, rhythmic pressure pulse from a large animal swimming nearby can cause an entire school to scatter before the predator is anywhere close. A swordfish hunting does not produce that signal. The swordfish's body is built for minimum water displacement at approach speed. The smooth skin, the oil layer, the streamlined bill parting the water ahead of the body all work together to minimize the pressure wave the fish generates as it moves. At approach speeds below full sprint, a swordfish moving through water creates almost no detectable acoustic signature at distances beyond a few body lengths. Scientists studying the hydrodynamics of swordfish movement modelled the pressure wave generated by the fish at various speeds. At the slow, steady pace the swordfish uses during the approach phase of a hunt, the pressure wave at a distance of 30 feet was at or below the detection threshold of the prey species the swordfish most commonly targets. The prey's lateral line, their own pressure sensing system, would not register a threat until the swordfish had already closed the gap to within striking range. At that point, acceleration happens. The swordfish shifts from approach speed to sprint in less than a body length. The sudden pressure wave from the acceleration does register in the prey's lateral line, but acceleration and prey detection together leave no time for an effective escape response. The school scatters, and by the time individual fish are moving outward from the centre, the bill strike is already complete. For giant squid specifically, the acoustic silence of the swordfish approach matters in a particular way. The giant squid's primary sensory alert system, the statocyst, detects low-frequency vibrations travelling through the water. It is highly sensitive to the movements of large animals at close range. But the statocyst is tuned for detecting sustained vibrations from moving bodies, not sudden, brief pressure events. A swordfish at slow approach speed produces sustained vibration below detection threshold. The transition to sprint happens so quickly that by the time the statocyst registers a threat level signal, the source is already inside the ink release range, where releasing ink provides minimal benefit. The giant squid evolved a remarkably sensitive vibration detector. The swordfish evolved a remarkably quiet approach. The two traits were shaped by the same evolutionary arms race described earlier, one side getting quieter, the other side getting more sensitive, until the detection threshold and the noise floor were so close together that the difference is measured in fractions of seconds. Fractions of seconds that determine whether the squid escapes or does not. The silence of the approach compounds every other advantage the swordfish carries into the hunt. Speed means nothing if the prey scatters before the attack begins. The swordfish's speed is most devastating precisely because the prey does not scatter until it is too late to matter. And on the ocean floor below all of this, the evidence of what happens accumulates. The deep ocean floor is a record of everything that happened above it. Material falls constantly from the water column above. Dead organisms, shed scales, fecal matter from animals at every depth, broken fragments of shells and bone and tissue. Scientists call this constant downward drift marine snow. It accumulates on the seafloor in layers over thousands of years, and examining what it contains tells researchers what was living above and how those animals were dying. In regions where swordfish actively hunt, the seafloor below tells a specific story. Remotely operated vehicles surveying the bottom in known swordfish hunting areas have collected samples and images showing accumulations of material that match swordfish hunting activity. Fish scales with cuts along their edges consistent with a lateral blade strike. Squid tissue fragments, specifically tentacle sections, with clean-cut ends on one side and ragged tissue tiers on the other. The pattern of a high-speed cutting event, one end severed cleanly, the other side torn when the remaining connection failed under stress. Scientists who analysed these remains at multiple sites across the Atlantic found that the concentration of cut-edge material was significantly higher in zones where swordfish tracking data showed peak hunting activity. The physical record on the seafloor matched the behavioural record from the tracking tags above. In some areas, near underwater canyon systems where swordfish aggregate seasonally, the seafloor accumulation of hunting debris is dense enough to form recognisable layers in sediment cores. Scientists drilling sediment cores from these locations can identify seasonal peaks in cut tissue material that correspond to historical swordfish migration timing. The giant squid remains found in these accumulations provide direct evidence of the encounter frequency between the two species. Scientists who examined a series of squid mantle fragments recovered from one canyon system found that a significant percentage of them showed bill-consistent cutting marks. Given that only a fraction of hunt debris reaches the seafloor intact, and that the ocean floor material represents accumulation from many years of activity, the actual encounter frequency between swordfish and giant squid in those zones was likely very high. Scientists also found something unexpected in some of the squid remains. The beak, the hardest part of the squid's body, the piece most likely to survive intact to the seafloor, was absent from many of the tissue accumulations. Swordfish swallow prey head first and whole when they can. A missing beak suggests the swordfish consumed the anterior end of the squid, including the beak, and left only the posterior tissue to sink. For an animal that relies on a bill strike to disable prey and then swallows prey whole, the absence of the beak in the seafloor record is a trace of a complete hunt. The swordfish disabled the squid, consumed it, and moved on. The ocean floor does not lie. It accumulates the truth of what happened above it over time, layer by layer, and what happened above it for millions of years shaped an ecosystem that depends on the swordfish in ways that only became clear when the fish disappeared. Remove a top predator from an ecosystem and the effects ripple downward through every level below it. Scientists have a term for this, a trophic cascade. When the animal at the top of a food chain is removed, the animals it previously controlled grow in numbers. Those animals then consume more of what they eat, which depletes the level below them. The cascade of effects moves downward through the food web, sometimes all the way to the base of the system. The swordfish removal from parts of the Atlantic in the 1980s and 90s, during the peak of industrial overfishing, provided an unplanned and tragic experiment in what a deep ocean food web looks like without one of its primary regulators. Scientists studying fish population data from the North Atlantic during that period documented several connected changes. As swordfish populations dropped by over half in some regions, the populations of their primary prey species rose. Certain squid species, previously kept at controlled densities by swordfish predation, expanded their population ranges and consumed more of their own prey at higher rates. The prey of those squid, smaller fish and zooplankton species, showed corresponding population declines in the same regions. The swordfish had been controlling not just squid populations, but, indirectly, the populations 2 levels below squid in the food chain. Deep-sea fish that swordfish regularly predated also expanded their ranges into territory they had previously avoided, possibly because swordfish presence had historically limited their movement into certain zones. With the swordfish pressure removed, those fish moved into new areas and competed with species they had not previously interacted with in significant numbers. Commercial fishermen working these regions during the population drop reported changes in what they encountered at depth. Species that had been uncommon in their target zones became regular catches. The composition of the deep water ecosystem was visibly shifting within a decade of the swordfish decline. Recovery programs implemented in the 90s, including international catch limits and gear modifications to reduce juvenile swordfish mortality, eventually allowed populations to partially recover over roughly 15 years. Scientists comparing the recovered regions to the depleted ones could see measurable differences in the prey species composition. Where swordfish returned, the prey population dynamics began shifting back toward historical patterns. The recovery was incomplete but showed a clear directional trend. The lesson from the overfishing period is that the swordfish occupies a functional position in the deep ocean food web that no other species fills in the same way. Other predators eat squid, other fast fish hunt mid-water schools, but the combination of depth range, hunting efficiency, and geographic coverage that the swordfish provides is unique. When it disappears, something changes that nothing else restores. An animal that hunts alone, crosses oceans alone, and asks for nothing from the ecosystem around it turns out to be holding that ecosystem together. And that ecosystem exists in a world the swordfish navigates with a sense that sounds impossible until you understand the science. By the early 1990s, something was going very wrong in the North Atlantic. Longline fishing vessels, ships that drag lines up to 60 miles long behind them, with thousands of baited hooks set at various depths, had been targeting swordfish commercially for decades. Swordfish meat is prized in restaurants across the United States and Europe. The fish's size, the quality of its flesh, and the predictability of its seasonal migrations made it an ideal commercial target. For years, the catches were enormous. Then the catches started falling. Fishermen who had worked the same routes for 20 years were coming back with smaller fish and fewer of them. The average size of swordfish caught dropped significantly over a decade. Younger, smaller fish were making up a larger proportion of the catch. Scientists analysing the population data recognised what this meant. The adult population was being removed faster than reproduction could replace it. The fish reaching adulthood were being caught before they had the chance to spawn. By the mid-90s, some estimates placed the North Atlantic swordfish population at roughly 30% of its historical size. Scientists and conservation organisations raised alarms. A public campaign called Give Swordfish a Break convinced a number of major restaurants in the United States to voluntarily remove swordfish from their menus. The campaign received enough attention that it reached Congress and eventually contributed to regulatory action. International agreements through bodies managing Atlantic fisheries led to catch limits, minimum size requirements that allowed juvenile fish to survive long enough to spawn, and reductions in longline effort in key swordfish breeding and feeding zones. The regulations were not welcomed by fishing industries that had built their operations around swordfish harvests. The economic disruption was significant and the political negotiation was difficult. The population responded. Slowly, over roughly 15 years of reduced fishing pressure, Atlantic swordfish numbers climbed back toward historical levels. By the early 2000s, scientists were reporting measurable increases in adult population estimates. Catch data began showing larger average fish sizes again as more individuals survived to full adulthood. The recovery was considered a genuine success story in ocean conservation, one of the few cases where a commercially overfished large marine predator showed substantial population recovery within a human observable time frame. The lesson carried a difficult truth. The swordfish population survived millions of years of natural predation, climate shifts, and competition with other apex predators. It came closer to practical collapse from a few decades of industrial fishing than it had from any natural pressure in its evolutionary history. The animal that terrifies giant squid and punches through submarine hulls turned out to be vulnerable to long lines and market demand in a way its biology never prepared it for. And in the darkness it patrols, something ancient and glowing has always been there with it. Imagine a world with no sun, no moon, no artificial light of any kind. Absolute darkness, but living. The only light comes from the bodies of the creatures around you, each glowing in shades of blue, green, and pale white. Some pulse rhythmically, some flash in sudden bursts, some glow continuously, a steady cold fire that illuminates nothing more than a few feet of water in any direction. This is the environment the swordfish hunts in every night. Bioluminescence is not rare in the deep ocean. Scientists estimate that roughly 80% of the creatures living below 1,000 feet produce their own light at some point in their lives. The chemical reaction that produces this light, involving a molecule called luciferin reacting with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme, is one of the most common biological reactions in the deep sea. It evolved independently in dozens of separate lineages of ocean life because light in the darkness serves so many purposes. Some animals use bioluminescence to attract prey. The anglerfish dangles a glowing lure above its mouth to draw curious smaller fish into striking range. Some animals use it to communicate with potential mates in the dark. Some use it as a defense, flashing suddenly to startle a predator, or producing a bright burst to temporarily blind an attacker. The most relevant use for the swordfish hunt is what is called bioluminescent burglar alarm. When a large predator moves through a dense cloud of bioluminescent plankton or small organisms, its passage disturbs them and they flash. The flashes trace the outline of the moving body in light, making the predator briefly visible even in total darkness. The swordfish's heated eyes, tuned specifically for detecting the blue-green wavelengths that bioluminescent organisms produce, see this illuminated outline clearly. A school of fish moving through bioluminescent plankton traces itself in flashes that the swordfish eye picks up from significant distance. The prey that thinks it is hidden in darkness is actually outlined in light. The swordfish also navigates by the bioluminescence of the animals around it. Different species produce different patterns and colours of light. A swordfish with eyes calibrated for this spectrum can identify what type of prey is ahead based on the light it produces before close enough to see body shape. Giant squid produce specific bioluminescent patterns on their mantle tissue, different from the steady glow of lanternfish schools and different from the pulsing of jellyfish. The swordfish eye, in theory, has enough resolution to distinguish between prey types by their light signature alone. Scientists studying swordfish eye optics found that the distribution of photoreceptor cells across the retina is concentrated in the area of the eye that would receive light coming from slightly above the fish's line of travel, the exact angle at which prey bioluminescence would appear during the ascending approach from below. The swordfish's eye is physically oriented to look for glowing prey above it in the darkness. The battlefield glows. The hunter sees all of it, and somewhere in that glow, the evidence of past battles sits marked on the bodies of the survivors. Science rarely gets to watch a swordfish fight a giant squid in real time. The depths are extreme. The animals move fast. Capturing the encounter on camera requires extraordinary luck or very specific equipment deployed in exactly the right place. Most of what scientists know about how often these encounters happen comes from indirect evidence. The most compelling indirect evidence is written on the bodies of the animals themselves. Giant squid that have been recovered through research catches and occasional strandings on beaches show a consistent pattern of scarring on their mantles and tentacles. Scientists who examined multiple specimens found circular marks, the diameter of a large coin, arranged in rough parallel lines across the squid's body. These marks match the cross-section of a swordfish bill almost exactly in size and shape. The geometry of the marks reveals something about how the encounter occurred. Parallel lines of marks, evenly spaced, suggest the bill passed through in a lateral sweep rather than a single puncture. Multiple parallel tracks close together indicate a repeated swing or a prolonged lateral contact as the bill swept across the body surface. The pattern is consistent with the hunting technique cameras have documented in shallower water, the lateral slash at high speed through a target. Scientists catalogued scarring patterns across dozens of giant squid specimens from the Atlantic and Pacific. Roughly a third of adult squid in some sample sets showed marks consistent with swordfish bill contact. Given that a single encounter does not necessarily leave visible long-term scarring, if the strike is glancing or contacts a tentacle that regenerates, the actual proportion of adults that had encountered a swordfish at some point in their lives is likely higher than the scar record alone shows. Swordfish recovered by commercial fishermen also carry marks from the encounters. The circular sucker tooth impressions left by giant squid arms appear on the flanks of swordfish in areas where the two species interact. In some cases, the sucker tooth marks penetrated deep enough into the scale-free skin to leave permanent scar tissue. A swordfish with squid sucker scars on its flank got close enough to a giant squid for the squid's arms to make contact. That proximity should not happen, often given the swordfish's speed advantage and bill-range hunting strategy. When it does happen, it suggests either a very close-range strike where the bill connected but the swordfish momentum carried it through the squid's reach, or a defensive grapple where the injured squid managed to briefly wrap an arm around the passing fish. Both scenarios confirm something important. These encounters are real, they are physically violent, and they leave marks on both sides. The population of giant squid navigating the deep ocean today carries the history of millions of swordfish encounters on its skin. And in the recorded history of these encounters, there is one case where the outcome was different. Every pattern has an exception. Scientists studying swordfish and giant squid interactions maintain the working assumption that when the two animals met, the swordfish controlled the encounter in almost every case. The speed advantage, the heated eyes, the bill range, the ambush technique from below. All of these factors pointed toward a consistent outcome with the swordfish as the dominant party. Then researchers reviewing deep-sea footage archives from a submersible survey near the Ogasawara Islands in the Western Pacific found something that did not fit the pattern. The footage showed a large swordfish, identifiable by its bill and crescent tail, in what appeared to be severely compromised condition near the seafloor at approximately 2,000 feet. The fish was moving slowly, almost drifting, with a visible injury to the mid-body region. Multiple loops of material were visible around the fish's midsection, consistent in texture and colour with giant squid tentacle tissue. The swordfish's bill was extended but not moving in any directed way. The footage lasted approximately 4 minutes before the swordfish drifted out of frame. No giant squid was visible during the recorded sequence, but the researchers noted that the tentacle-like material around the fish would be consistent with squid arms that had separated from the body during a struggle, remaining wrapped around the swordfish after the squid itself retreated or was injured. Scientists analysing the footage reached no firm conclusion about what had occurred before the camera recorded the scene. The swordfish may have struck the squid successfully and then been grabbed by the squid's arms during the close-range follow-through, resulting in mutual injury. The swordfish may have struck something else, and the squid opportunistically attacked an already injured fish. The material wrapped around the fish may have been debris and not squid tissue at all. The footage is the subject of ongoing discussion in the scientific community. Without a before and after sequence showing the full encounter, any interpretation carries significant uncertainty. What makes the footage significant is that it represents, as far as current records show, the only documented evidence of a swordfish in a compromised state that is plausibly connected to a giant squid encounter. Every other piece of evidence, the scarring patterns, the ink cloud footage, the squid avoidance behaviour, the bill strike remains on the seafloor, all points toward an asymmetric relationship where the swordfish wins. One ambiguous piece of footage does not overturn that pattern, but it raises a question that scientists find genuinely compelling. If a giant squid, using its 3 hearts, its toothed suckers, and its bone-crushing beak, managed to get its arms fully around an approaching swordfish before the bill strike disabled it, what would the outcome be? The swordfish's smooth, scaleless skin would provide no resistance to the sucker teeth. The grip of a full-grown giant squid is estimated to generate forces that no fish of swordfish size could break by thrashing. Nobody knows for certain, and that uncertainty points directly to a longer list of things about the swordfish that science cannot yet answer. The swordfish has been studied for over a century. Commercial fishermen have caught millions of them. Scientists have tagged them, dissected them, run their tissue through laboratory equipment, and followed them across ocean basins with satellite trackers. The bill has been tested in mechanical rigs. The eyes have been measured under electron microscopes. The migration routes have been mapped across multiple generations of fish, and there are still things nobody understands. The navigation remains the most significant gap. Scientists know the swordfish migrates across ocean basins and returns to specific regions year after year with high accuracy. They know the fish likely uses multiple sensory inputs to navigate: magnetic field sensitivity, water temperature gradients, chemical signatures of specific water masses. All are plausible mechanisms supported by research in related species. None have been directly demonstrated in the swordfish. The specific mechanism by which a swordfish crossing 3,000 miles of open ocean arrives precisely at a canyon system it visited the previous year is, as of now, unknown. The depth limit is also unclear. Tagged swordfish have been recorded at 3,000 feet, but scientists are not certain this represents the actual maximum depth the fish can reach. The tags used in most studies have pressure limits that prevent recording below certain depths, and several tags have been recovered showing evidence of having been at the limit of their recording capability for extended periods. Whether the swordfish goes deeper than 3,000 feet regularly, occasionally, or at all remains an open question. The social behaviour, or lack of it, raises questions that have never been fully resolved. Swordfish are considered solitary, but aggregations of multiple individuals occur at specific locations during migration and spawning. What happens during those aggregations, whether there is any communication, any hierarchy, any learned behaviour exchanged between individuals has not been studied in enough detail to answer. The fish do not stay together long enough in accessible locations for researchers to observe the interactions thoroughly. The heating organ's full function is still being explored. Scientists established that it keeps the eye and adjacent brain tissue warm. Whether it serves any additional functions beyond temperature regulation, such as electrical field generation, pressure sensing, or some chemical role in the fish's metabolism, has not been ruled out. The organ is more complex at the cellular level than a simple heat generation structure would need to be, and that complexity suggests functions that have not been identified yet. The relationship between swordfish and giant squid at a population level across ocean basins remains incompletely described. Scientists know the interactions occur, know they leave physical evidence on both animals, and know they influence squid behaviour. How much of the giant squid's distribution, depth preference, and behavioural repertoire has been shaped specifically by swordfish predation pressure over evolutionary time versus other pressures is a question the fossil record cannot yet fully answer, and there is the simplest gap of all. Nobody has ever witnessed, on camera with clear footage from start to finish, a complete swordfish hunt of a giant squid in its natural environment. Fragments exist, inference exists, the physical evidence on seafloors and animal bodies exists. The complete encounter, from the moment the swordfish detects the squid below 3,000 feet of dark water to the moment the hunt ends, has never been recorded. The ocean is 321 million cubic miles in volume. The encounter happens somewhere in that volume, in complete darkness, faster than most cameras can track, at depths that challenge every piece of equipment humans have built. It is happening right now. We just cannot see it yet.